Welcome back to today's webinar. I'm Kyle Baccei, Communications Manager here at the Leadership Institute. So how do you negotiate a raise? That's today's topic here in the Leadership Institute studios. This is part of our continuing series on career skills. So we are going to roll forward with this and hopefully have a great discussion today with our guest, Steven Sutton. Steve joins us with many years of managerial experience on the Hill, campaigns, and from nonprofit work. He has a number of great stories. We talked a little bit before we got started, so I think we're going to be in for some great information. He's going to go through some of the helpful do's and don'ts of salary negotiation. But before we get into that, I want to remind you, as always, to please send in your questions to live@leadershipinstitute.org and join us on social media using the hashtag #LIWebinar. With that, Steve, negotiating a raise, where do you start?
Well, as in all things, you start at the beginning. There are really two opportunities to negotiate raise, and they are different enough situations that we should talk about them separately, I think. There is the raise you negotiate in your current position, and then there's the raise you negotiate when you are considering an offer for a new position. So let's start with that, because there are a lot of young people that might be interviewing for their first job, and having never done this before, only about 30% of people actually negotiate their salary. The other 70% accept the offers. Mm-hmm. And of the 30% who do negotiate the salary, over half of them get some kind of an increase. And so it suggests that you should negotiate a salary. So what do you do when you're a newbie out of college? You can't wait to call mom and dad and say, somebody likes me, they really, really like me, and they want to offer me a job, and you're desperate just to say yes. You have to resist the temptation. Ideally, you should, I don't like to say never and always, but ideally you should never accept an offer that's given to you right away.
That's got to be tough.
It sure is.
Like you just mentioned, you're right out of college. You're looking for that first job. You see the youth unemployment rate. I mean, that's got to be that's tough. How do you just say?
Well, let's talk about that, because often the offer comes on the phone. You've had your interview. It's rare that right in the interview they make you the offer. But regardless, if they do that, you should ask for one day. And most employers are not going to mind you asking for one day to just think about it. Mm-hmm. You can explain that you don't like to do anything without giving it thoughtful consideration. I'm a thoughtful, mature person. Yeah. I just want to sleep on it, if that's okay. Can I let you know tomorrow morning? Now they may say no, it's take it or leave it time. And if you're in that situation, then you can't say, but I refuse. I was taught not to. You're going to have to. But if you can, you want to delay it a day. And what that gives you is it gives you a little negotiating room and some time to reflect on the offer. Offers will fall into one of three categories. There's the offer you really cannot take because the offer is so low, it's below your living and subsistence level. And that is a situation where you can say no, I just can't do it. Mm-hmm. There is the offer that is so fantastic, you think they've made a mistake, and you want to say yes right away. And if you do, it's not the end of the world by any means. You should still ask if I can wait till tomorrow morning, right. But if you don't, you'll be justified. And then there's all the offers in the middle. They're at an amount that is okay with you, think is fair, but you think that there's some room there. And so let's talk about that category. Because if it's the second category where the offer is so fantastic you're just going to grab it, then these techniques in the middle will work, but if you don't get anything, you're still going to say yes.
Before we get into that, what is the most important thing to do to find out what the high number is and the low number is?
Research.
Yeah.
You've got to do your research. It's true for the position. It's true to research the company.
Yeah.
Research always is the predicate behind anything.
Right.
In campaigns we'd see, do research on the district and on yourself and on the other person. You're researching donors and their histories, and you're always doing research. So prior to an interview, you want to research the company and the position, but you should also research the salary. So there's a number of websites. Payscale.com, I think, is one. Salary.com is another. But there's probably dozens of them that you can go on and get some data for the position. And some of the better ones will actually incorporate the cost of living for your area. So you can type in your zip code, and there'll be a bump for the DC area.
Right.
And so you can get a pretty good idea for similar jobs, at least by the job title. And then you'll have to apply it for the job title.
And industry for the most part as well. You know, difference between private sector pay, non-profit.
Sure, and then also based on experience. If you're coming out of college, your experience is more likely zero. There might be some internships and things, but experience, which is important, and education level. That's another thing. If you're a college graduate or a high school graduate or you have a PhD, the same job will pay different because their expectations for you are going to be different. They'll expect more from you and will expect to pay you more based on your education level. So all those can be incorporated on these websites, and you can get a fairly good idea of the range for this position. So that and if the range is so low you can't live on it, then it's the wrong job for you. I mean, theoretically, it's going to be something that you could accept. And you know that going in.
Cool. Let's get back to the middle section. So we're in that middle section. I've just offered you somewhere in the middle between that. What are the next steps? What happens after that?
You want to wait and ask for a day. And then the next day is when the negotiation begins.
Yeah.
And I want to stress that your negotiating position should be based on the truth, the reality. I'm going to talk about several techniques that work. But don't use a technique that works because it works if it's not true. So the first thing you have to say, if the salary is completely below what you can do, you just have to tell them up front, I'm excited to get this offer. I think this is a fit. I'm glad you think so too. But the salary is not what I expected.
Right.
And it's below what I can accept. You're basically telling them, if you don't increase the offer, I am not taking the job.
Right, and that's for that low number range.
For the low number. If you plan on taking it, even if they say no, don't use that technique.
Yeah.
Because you look foolish. I cannot take it at $25,000 a year. Well, that's the best we can do, and oh, okay, well, I'll take it.
You just told me you can't take
and so now you're coming off. That's a bad place to start with your employer.
Right.
I guess you could say, and I'll wait tables at night, and I'll bartend, and I'll do these other things, and I'll babysit and mow lawns and have car washes, and I'll manage. But it's better not to do that. I think at some level you just have to say no. So say you're in that middle area. You would take the job at the salary that was offered, but you want to negotiate. And by the way, most employers expect you to negotiate.
Okay.
If it's a sales job and you don't negotiate, they're going to be thinking they made the wrong offer, that they chose the wrong person.
Okay.
It's a sales job.
Yeah.
They expect you to negotiate. If it's marketing or business, they expect you to negotiate. When you negotiate, you're showing them that you feel you have worth, which they've said you have by offering you the job. And so you tell them your story. I'm excited to get the offer, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm excited to get started, and I appreciate your confidence in me. However, I've just moved to the area. I have moving expenses. It's hardest for conservatives because we don't like to make pleas based on need. But you are going to lay that out.
Yeah.
I have moving expenses. I just moved into an apartment, so I have my security deposit. My student loans are coming due. And then you ask the question, it's the magic 7 words that makes your time watching this worthwhile. And the magic 7 words are, is that the best you can do? Is that the best you can do?
Yeah.
And then you have to shut up. And it's hard because you're selling and you're telling them and you want to repeat what you just said. You've got to just be quiet at that point. You've basically told them, I need more money. Is that the best you can do?
Yeah.
So that is one technique. and then they will come back. They may say, yes, it's the best we can do. Well, then well, okay. But they may say, well, let me see. Mm-hmm. I actually did this with a young man who worked at Leadership Institute, Josiah, mm-hmm. and I talked to him, and he told me that he was actually in a room with all of the people to be interviewed, and they called them in one at a time, which is a huge mistake from their standpoint. And I said, well, what can you tell me about the other people? And he said, well, they were all older than me. I said, well, this is going to be easy. By interviewing everyone older than you, they basically were telling you or showing that they can afford to pay more for
right.
more experience.
Right.
The fact that they settled on you is great because they felt that you had the ability and potential and experience, mm-hmm. but they were willing to interview people with more experience, meaning they were willing to offer more money. So that was easy. They did not mute the button. He said, is that the best you could do? And he heard them put the phone down and he heard them talking. He wants more money, what do we do? You heard the whole conversation, it was very funny. And they came back on the phone and gave him an extra $5,000.
Wow. And
just
so
on the phone.
And now, that is exactly, that's 5,000 more for his starting point from everything else from there.
Right. It's not just the 5,000 for the next year. It's
right.
5,000 more. It's a new baseline for the mm-hmm. rest of your career.
Yeah.
George Mason and Temple University just did a study where they calculated that a $5,000 higher salary, a $5,000 raise when you're 25 years old, over the course of your career, which is, I suppose, 40 mm-hmm. years till you're 65, you can't just say 5,000 times 40. Mm-hmm. It means $200,000. No. That $5,000 directly leads to an increase over your career of $634,000 in additional pay. In fact, that might not even be a bad way to, I would like you to give me a $634,000 raise right now. And the guy will look at me like crazy. All you have to do is give me 5,000 more right now, because that's the difference it'll make over my lifetime. If you do the math, for every $1,000 that you get, it's an extra $125,000
over your lifetime.
Over your lifetime.
Wow.
So the greatest increases in your salary will be between the ages of 25 and 35. Percentage.
Okay.
And so it's very important. And so to not negotiate that initial job salary, you are putting yourself behind for the rest of your life. Because so many people ask, what are you making now? And predicate their offers on your current salary.
Gotcha.
And so you want to be able to have that higher salary. Mm-hmm. But let me go through the other technique. An even better technique is to tell them, you're my first choice. But I do have to tell you, I am interviewing elsewhere. If that's true. Mm-hmm. It should be true. You
right.
can't imagine you're getting an offer from the one place that you're interviewing at. I am interviewing elsewhere. And in fact, I've been called back to one or two or several of those. And I have interviews scheduled for next week. Mm-hmm. And those will be offering me $5,000 more than your offer. Is that the best you can do? Now, you've just told them that you want to take their job.
Right.
But there are other jobs that are going to offer more. So if you want to risk losing me, mm-hmm. say nothing. But if you want to take me off the market right now, make me a competitive offer. You haven't said any of that, and yet you have said all of that.
Right.
And so at that point, I cannot imagine they're not going to offer you more money. And in fact, just this week, because she couldn't wait till today's webinar, a young lady who works at the Leadership Institute was told to visit me.
Yeah.
And we went through this very scenario. She had an offer, and she told me it's okay to mention the amount, $35,000. Mm-hmm. And she was so excited, she says, I wanted to say yes right there, but everyone told me not to, and to come talk to you first. So she came down and she said, I have to give them an answer today. Mm-hmm. Today was the next day.
Right.
What do I do? She goes, I want to just tell them yes. So we went through the scenario. She was interviewing elsewhere. I said, you tell them you're interviewing elsewhere, the salaries are higher, and then the 7 magic words. And on the phone, they gave her an extra $3,000.
Wow.
Okay, so over the course of her lifetime, that's another $375,000.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm expecting lunch. Just so you know. No, I'm not. Just kidding. But that's $375,000. Now, she would have taken it 35. But she got more because, and I think they actually asked her for a number. Be prepared for them to ask for a number also. You could say, is that the best you can do? They may come back and say, well, what do you have in mind? And at that point, you have to have a number that you want to give them. If you give them a range, you're giving them the low number of the range. If you say, I'd like 3,000 to 5,000 more, well, then they're going to offer you 3, not 5. What you might do is ask for the 5. Doesn't mean they're going to give it to you, but they might.
Right.
10% more is not considered rude. So on 35,000, 3,500 would have been 38.5. So the example that I just gave, she came back asking for less than 10% more. There should not be a business in America that's going to risk losing the person they've chosen for $3,000. So negotiating works.
Yeah.
Not all the time. I mean, they may come in high to grab you, and you have to know. Maybe they offered you 40, and that was more than you thought. And you don't want to push it too much. But if you were to if they offered 40, you could say, "Well, you're getting closer," and then you have to be prepared with numbers. You ask for 3, and they give you 3. Then the negotiation's over, and you have to say yes or no.
Right.
I mean,
but all that comes after you do your research.
That's correct. You've got to know what these jobs do pay.
Right. For instance, applying for a job on the Hill, you told me a story the other day about it. You can't. Somebody comes in to the office and says, "Oh, I want to make more than the congressman." Well, haha, get out of here.
That's right. I actually had a situation. A young man, college graduate, sharp guy, comes in and was interviewing for a legislative assistant position, and 45 minutes later, I said, "So, what is your salary requirements?" And he said, $85,000. And I said, well, I said, I have to ask you, why did you just waste my time? Why did you just waste 45 minutes of my life? You know that LAs don't make $85,000. Yeah, but that's what I want to make. I should be making, I said, my LD doesn't make $85,000. That's just a ridiculous, and there's no negotiation at that point. It's like when you're watching, Pawn Stars on TV, and somebody comes in and wants $50,000 for something, and the appraiser comes in and says, well, it's worth $5,000. And then they ask, well, now how much do you want? Oh, I still want $50,000. Well, then you're not going to make a deal at that point. Right. You're in silly land. So, but you can get salaries. Keep in mind, the unemployment rate nationally is 5.2, and I know it's the under. For college graduates, it's less. For college graduates in the Washington area, it's even less. I mean, we're talking about for college graduates in D.C., it's a fairly tight job market. And for people who can walk and chew gum, it's even tighter. So if you have talents and you have ability and potential, you're going to get offers. And they will be fairly strong offers. For someone coming out of school to be making in the 30s or even low 40s, potentially, but upper 20s, if you're rooming with somebody in a conservative commune, as I call them, you can do this. And so, but don't sell yourself short and negotiate.
Is there any other things you can do? You can ask for money up front right there. Right. What about saying, okay, I'll take this today, but in a year I want to make this much?
Sure. There's other techniques than say, let's continue with the 35,000. Yeah. They say that's the best we can do. We've got our budgets. That's what's in the budget. You can take it, but then there are a bunch of alternatives that you can negotiate. First of all, that's base salary. What about the benefits? So do they have metro parking? And do they have metro or parking? Say they provide a parking spot for everyone, but you take metro. Well, they reimburse you so much per month. If they reimburse $100 a month, that's $1,200 more a year. That's a lot of lunches. But you have to ask. What if you neither metro, what if you walk? And explain to them, well, I'm walking to work. So can I be compensated an additional $1,000 a year to make up for that? They may say no, but they might say yes. The other thing I like to do, we're at the end of the year. I understand that's your budget now, but in January, your budgets are annual budgets. So come January, I can accept 35 now if I can make 38 January 1st.
Right. Now,
They may have more flexibility there. And think, well, that's a promise in the future. This town of politicians loves to make promises in the future. And so that might be more flexible. They'll come back typically and say, well, we do 30-day or 60-day or 90-day reviews, and we'll
right.
talk about it then.
That's my next, what if they come back and say, oh, well, we do this on an evaluation basis, so we're not going to,
You want to try and get out of the evaluation game. Because, all right, they'll review it in 90 days. We reviewed it in 90 days, and we're going to keep it where it is. If that's the position and you can't change it, then that's
right.
the position. But you can ask for anything. You can say, that's all well and good. But if you still like the work that I'm doing, then in 6 months I want to be making 38, and in 12 months I want to make 42. And that's my expectation.
And what if they say to you, well, how will I know if I like the work you're doing?
And you say, well, I think we'll all know, because if you don't, fire me. I've done that. If you don't like the work I'm doing, fire me. But if you haven't fired me, I have to assume you like the work that I'm doing. So it won't be a question of being stuck. Dump me. And then, of course, work your tail off and impress them, which I'm sure you'll do. So if they say yes, sometimes you can ask for it in writing. I've never done that, but you could. I'll accept it at 35, but June 1st I want to be making 38, and December 1st I want to be making 42, and lock those in.
So it's a leap of faith between you.
But it always is.
Right.
Any job is. And so that's another thing. Another thing, so I call that the bump or the double bump, where you know on a date certain you'll be making a certain salary. The other thing you could do is you could ask for a signing bonus. Okay, not that we're the NFL draft, but you can do that. And I understand that everyone else in this position is making 35. I don't want to upset the apple cart, but I have many upfront costs. And would you consider a signing bonus if I were to accept today and not go to those other interviews that I told you about? And you might be surprised, because they could, with a straight face, say that we hired her at the same salary that you're making. But to get her, we had to give her a signing bonus of $3,000, $5,000. And I've heard of many cases where people do get signing bonuses. Now, that will not equate to $634,000 over your lifetime, because it's a one-time thing. You really prefer to get it in the salary. You also have to consider all the other benefits. What are the retirement benefits? Is there a matching retirement plan? That's real money, and if they give those things, you consider it. Health care as well. So you have to look at your total package.
Student loan repayment.
Right, on the Hill they do that. I'm not sure other places. Some places will pay for your college, or grad school. So if you want to take additional courses, you can get your employer to pay for those. And that could amount to thousands of dollars as well. So there's a lot of different things.
Okay. You have a current job. You're looking for the next job.
Right.
You get an offer from the next job. What do you say to your current employee to not piss them off? Can you negotiate with them to try? What do you say?
Well, you can. That all depends upon who you're working for. If you're working for a jerk or not, you may piss them off regardless. So let's shift then from the job out of school to the current job.
Yeah.
How do you negotiate current salary? Everyone at the Leadership Institute, turn off your televisions now. You can wait for the normal evaluation process, which is typically once a year. But the best way to get a raise is not to wait. The best way is to jump that system. Ideally, you want to express or document your value to the company, to the employer. So the ideal time is after a major project. You've been assigned a major project, you've completed it, you get accolades, and that's the best time to walk in, can I talk with you? Okay? And you have to be careful with documenting your success. From a monetary standpoint, you can't walk into your boss and say, the value of our building is $5 million. And for the past 6 months, I have not burned down the building. And so therefore, I have saved the company $5 million by not destroying the building. I think I deserve a raise. And some people have done pretty close to that. I haven't done something disastrous, which I haven't destroyed the company car, I haven't gotten drunk and ripped apart my office. Therefore, I should be compensated for it. So it has to have some real value where you've brought some value, and monetary value preferably, to the company that's documented and agreed to. And then you could also, and then again, research. What are people making in your area with your salary, if you feel that you're underpaid. I caution people to leverage other offers from other companies.
Okay.
Because that's a signal that you've been looking, and that then starts to erode the loyalty test that employers will have just.
Have you ran into this at all?
Oh, sure. I'm going to try to keep this as generic as possible so as to not reveal. I was the chief of staff on the Hill. My legislative director came to me, and his wife worked for another member, and so he was, they commute, and so he would pick her up in the other office. So he's always going by there. Well, apparently they were impressed with him, and they offered him the LD, legislative director job, in their office. So it's a lateral move, but it was for more money, not a lot more, maybe 10,000 more, but also he'd be working in the same office with his wife, which he wanted to do, newlyweds, and so he said, well, I'm thinking of, I want to mention this to the congressman before the weekend, just so I can get this, out in the open. And I said, don't do it. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, if you share that with the congressman, you're giving your notice. He will consider it a betrayal, particularly as a lateral move. That you're going to quit his working for him to work for one of his colleagues. He's not going to take it well. They're all egomaniacs, and they're just not going to take it well. Well, I really want to tell him, I think he deserves that. I said, you're not doing it for him. You're doing it for you because you can't stand the secret and you want to get it off your chest. He did not follow my advice. He walks into the congressman's office. It was only 10 minutes later that he comes out. He walks by my desk and he goes, well, you were right. And that was the end of that. And I said, well, I told you, I like when people ask your advice, and then when you give it to them, they completely ignore it. If I wanted to be treated that way, again, I'd go home and talk to my children. But he went, and he got the pay raise, and everything worked out fine for him. But you've got to be careful to leverage an offer from somebody else to a raise. Because even if you get the raise, there's going to be a level of mistrust or distrust that's been introduced by you. Are you still looking?
Can you be truthful with your current employer if you're looking? Can you be like, look?
It depends upon the employer.
Yeah.
With some people you can be, but with others you just can't. You have to weigh that for yourself in your situation, whether it's the company, the employer, the boss's boss. I mean, who are we dealing with? For example, on the Hill, in the example I gave, he could tell me, and I understood the situation, but he couldn't tell the congressman. So that was the distinction in that office.
Sure. So getting back to, you're at your current salary, you're in your current job, you're talking to your supervisor. What are the steps you should do leading up to that salary negotiation?
Well, first and foremost, do a good job. You have to be in a strong position in order to ask for that type of consideration outside of the normal situation. Now, by the way, some businesses you just can't. You could ask, but the answer is going to be the salaries are the salaries. At some point, you can't be given too much more because there's other people in a similar job description who are making pretty much the same. You can't make more than your supervisors or supervisors in other departments. Sometimes you may not fully appreciate what's going on in the entire company, in other departments and where people are and the compensations, and you won't be privy to that, and so you just won't know. So sometimes the answer is going to be, I just can't do that for you. And if that means you have to start looking for something else, then maybe that's what you do.
In that
But
situation, could you again ask for, okay, can I just get a bonus on this?
you can ask for anything, sure. You can ask bonus, you can ask for the bump, the double bump.
Well, no, I'm saying,
if
if they ask for a bump, but they say, oh, we just can't do that right now because
Sure.
X, Y, and Z. Can I do the?
I'd like to work here for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Can we work something out?
Right.
And then sometimes there's more flexibility with that. And quite frankly, it's not contractually. You start messing up, they're still going to fire you. You can't say, well, 2 years ago you promised me that I could be making this in 3 years,
Right.
and
Well,
so
you
I'm
haven't done your
here.
job.
So you have to maintain the performance.
Right.
And conversely, you're not supposed to quit during those 3 years, but you could, I suppose. I can't imagine that they're going to come after you. If they gave you a bonus and you signed that if I take another job in the next 3 years, I give back the bonus.
Yeah.
That's legally binding. So just be careful about that one. They may come after you.
Wow. So, okay, you've done your research, you're looking at all the things. Are you, in the research process, are you allowed to say, oh, before I go in and do my performance evaluation and then, the next step of getting starting the negotiation of a higher salary, can you go and say, I'd like to take you to lunch, supervisor, and ask the questions, what benefits do I have, or is that showing your hand too early? Do you have any advice on that part of the research?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of I want to take you to lunch. There's implicit level of bribery depending on where you're eating, I suppose. But but I want to talk to you about it. You should be able to put together the benefits that you've brought to the company on your own. That's a question that I don't think you should ask your supervisor. Can you tell me how well I've been doing?
Right.
And having said that, to have a conversation, what do I need to be doing to get a raise next year is reasonable. But you should do that with your immediate supervisor, I think, rather than your boss's boss's boss.
Right.
That's not, because the boss's boss's boss will say, well, talk to your supervisor about what it is that you should be doing. They'll make a recommendation, which I'll look at, but I'm going to look at it with whatever they submit to me. So that's a little bit too high of a level to be asking for that type of a conversation, I think. But again, if you give a range, and you've documented it, and I've got on these websites, and here's what people of my level are making. Those are all fair things to introduce into the. Are all my staff calling and asking for a raise? Is that? Are they all lined up? Ask Steve. Ask Steve if I can have another $10,000.
For the record, that's not what it says.
That's one of my interns.
I think you don't have your glasses on.
Okay.
No, but we do have a question from one of our live audience that we'll get to now. And so this person would like to know, is it ever worth it to take a job making less than your current job to gain experience?
It's a great question.
Or in a nonprofit, or cause your passion?
Absolutely. There's another saying that I like to use. You learn in your 20s so you can earn in your 30s. The first jobs out of college should be the jobs, if you can afford to take them, are jobs where you will learn the most. And so while the salary, extra $5,000 when you're 25, does lead to $634,000 over the course of your career, learning, maybe you can get a $10,000 increase instead of $5,000 when you're 28. Learning in your profession is always more important. So not just the experience, by the way, because experience suggests simply time in position. Experience and knowledge, that's the key. Because the fact is, what you learned in college likely is not what you need for that first job. And so learning in those jobs is very important. So sure. And I've taken steps back in pay to take 2 steps forward within a year in a profession. Particularly now when people are changing professions so frequently, you may have to take that step back, realize I'm well compensated, but I hate my job and I hate my life, and I'm going to take a step back and at a reduced compensation to learn a new thing. And so I can see that happening, sure.
But would that ever hurt you in terms of salary negotiations and moving up the ladder?
Great question. It will technically hurt you, except for the fact, I'm going to sound like Susie Orman now, it will not hurt you because you'll be happier. And when you're happier, you do a better job. And when you do a better job, you'll be fairly compensated for that job. So in the long term, it will not hurt you. But in the short term, simply looking at it on paper, it may appear that it will. But there's nothing more powerful than a motivated employee in a job that they love. And you will then, having taken a step back, you will soon be taking 2 leaps forward. And you'll more than compensate for that. And then we won't be talking about a $10,000 raise. You'll be talking about $40,000 raises. You'll be moving from one job to the next and getting 5-figure offers, but higher offers.
Right. So it's taking a step back to do something you like, to motivate yourself to do better and move up the chain even faster than you would in the job.
Absolutely. And in fact, a good example is the Hill job. A lot of people work for less as legislative assistants, but their salaries are doubled when they go work for a lobbyist or an association that specializes in the issue. And they don't even interview for those jobs. Can't tell you how many legislative assistants I've lost to people who have come into the office for a meeting. So it'll be a constituent who brings a lobbyist and who's arranging the visit. And the lobbyist will go back to their office and they'll say, you know, we have an opening for a legislative assistant here at the firm.
Right.
Well, what about Valerie?
Right.
You know, we just met with her. She was on top of it. She knew all the legislation. She knew everything. She knew what we were going to be talking about before we came in.
And she probably has contacts.
And she knows all the people on that committee. And then bam, she gets an offer for double her salary.
Right.
And it just you don't even have to be interviewing. People will notice you when you love your work and you're enthusiastic about it. That is more important ultimately. And so. That's a great point, great question.
Okay, so we got a couple more questions here. Here's one. What about when they ask you for a salary requirement before you have a job?
That's always difficult.
Yeah.
Then you do 7 syllables, not 7 words. I think it's 7 syllables. My total compensation is. So rather than simply giving them your base salary, you can truthfully, always be truthful, but you could truthfully tell them about all the other things. So your base salary might be $30,000, but you're getting the Metro $1,000, you're getting some educational benefits. I'm not sure if you want to include health care in there, but I guess you could. What other benefits are you getting? Your retirement benefits. Where you are now, your retirement benefits might be better than what they're offering. So my total compensation is, and then tell them what that is.
Of your current job.
Of your current job. Ideally, you don't want to tell them.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to say to be discussed. You know, they ask you to fill out a form. If you feel comfortable, to be discussed.
Yeah.
But if they demand it, and you have to put something in there, and they may even say, what is your base salary? So they're even saying, I don't want to hear all the benefits. If you have to, then you have to. But ideally, you don't want to do that. So you want to discuss it further. Never bring it up in an interview. If they may, but don't you bring it up. And at that time, you can tell them, but I understand for this position that the range is between $40,000 and $50,000. Or it's my understanding for similar positions to this, the range with my level of experience is between 40 and 50, which makes my 30 irrelevant. Because if they want to go to what you're making now, there are ways around that. And we've explained a few of them now where they may offer you 30 and say, is that the best I could do? I'm interviewing elsewhere. They're going to offer me 45,000. And so to be competitive, either you're in the game or you're not. Unless you walk in, it's like walking into a car dealership and you go up to the show car on the floor of the showroom and you yell in your loudest voice, "I love this car!" Well, at that point, you might as well give the guy your checkbook.
Right. Right.
Or you go to an open house and it's perfect. We could put the sofa here and already you're decorating. So it's kind of similar.
Good stuff. Well, the questions keep coming in, so
All right.
we'll keep on asking them.
Sure.
This person would like to know, I've been working with a professional association for 3 months, but I took a pay cut to work here because I love the work.
Right.
We reviewed in December for a pay increase and bonus,
Right.
but my 1-year anniversary isn't until August. Our fiscal budgets are determined in April each year. When is the best time to approach my boss for a raise?
Again, after you've done something significant is the best time. But barring that, 3 months is a little early. It's hard to answer that question without some context, though. What was the circumstances 3 months ago when you
Right.
took the job? What was the understanding? Did you have those conversations? So when will I be evaluated? Well, evaluations are every December. Well, even if you've only been there 3 months, technically you're going to be evaluated. So are the evaluations done on an annual basis when you've been there for 12 months? Or is it done on an annual calendar basis? And if you've only been there 3 months, well, you're going to get reviewed in December, my friend. So you should be prepared in December to ask for whatever it is you want to ask for, I think. There's no hard and fast rule. It's just like the question, should I stay here for 2 years? Because employers don't like to see you moving from one job to the next unless you've stayed there for 2 years. I've heard that, gosh, I don't know how many times. That's some magical industrial industry rule. You have to stay in your job for 2 years.
Right.
Hogwash.
If you have a better offer, you should just not worry about that loyalty
Yes.
stuff.
Particularly if it's a better offer, which suggests that it's a pay raise or a promotion. If you can show on a resume, particularly in Washington, but if you can show on a resume and your employment history that you've been accepting promotions after only 6 months, you can easily explain a resume where you've been dancing around for every 6 months. Well, I've just had these opportunities. People keep coming to me. It's not my fault that I'm so good, that I'm jumping ahead of my colleagues and my peers, and people recognize that. Now, yeah, there may be some pause about hiring you because you're going to leave in 6 months, but a confident employer will say, well, they're not going to leave here because we're going to give them the right type of job with the right compensation and the right joy of working here. And so, yeah, you can jump around. But if you're jumping around every 3 months to the same job, just in different offices, well, that's going to send off signals. If you're jumping around every 6 months to lower jobs,
It's all gonna send.
you know, just tattoo loser on your forehead and get it over with. Not really, Kyle. Don't do that.
Wasn't planning on it. Don't
Okay,
worry.
I just wanted to make sure.
We have another question coming
Sure.
in here. What if you have more experience but not a degree? How do you sell your history for higher pay?
Well, hopefully you've done that in your jobs. In other words, that suggests that you're in the workforce. So your resume should reflect not your degree or lack of it. I can tell you how many people that I've hired not knowing they didn't have a college degree. I hired one young lady to be a legislative assistant in our office. Well, actually, she started out as an intern, and then hired her as a legislative assistant. I found out after she was 17 years old and hadn't been to college. I didn't know that. I didn't ask. You can't ask what is your age. And she didn't put college on there, and I didn't think to ask. So impressed was she was fantastic. She could write brilliantly. She was 17 years old. So I think she was the youngest legislative assistant in the history of the House.
I'm going to be honest, that's very hard to believe.
Yeah. She was homeschooled.
Yeah.
She was homeschooled, and she was just that impressive. You know, and
what kinds of things did she say to make you impressed with her?
she didn't say it. She was an intern, and she wrote fantastically. She was such a great writer. I started sending all of the drafts of everything to her. I didn't know she was 17 years old. And they would come out and they were just brilliant. It's her work that spoke. So that's my answer to that last question. Your work should be speaking for itself to some extent. You should also consider going back and getting a degree, potentially. Will an employer pay for courses? I mean, there are employers that will encourage you to get that degree. And you could actually work somewhere and get your degree in the evenings and end up in 4 to 6 years with a college, or 3 years with a college degree. And then you don't have to ask that question ever again. But your experience should speak for itself, and it should be so strong in the jobs that you've done that you could start to jump in salary. But if not having a college degree is an impediment, then you're applying for jobs that need that. And then you can't address that with only experience. Now, often people will say college degree required simply to narrow the field. It's not really necessary, but if it's required, it's required. But other times they feel that it is for a level of maturity or whatever, what have you. And you have to just determine for yourself, based on your career choice, what your path is ahead, if you need to get that degree or how you need to deal with it. But if you're in the workforce, your work should speak for itself up to a point, and then you need to promote yourself, brand yourself, and what have you, so that your work just speaks louder than the lack of that college degree.
Great. I'm going to give you sum everything up. Did we forget anything that we were supposed to talk about?
I'm sure we forgot lots of things, but no, do your research, do a great job, there's no substitute for that, and ask, because you don't get what you don't ask for, and negotiate. People are not going to be put off or embarrassed by it. They expect a certain level of negotiation, so that's okay. And if you do use the techniques that we've talked about, you should end up with higher salaries.
Right. Remember the fine line between confidence and arrogance, going in and asking for the bad salaries. And remember that seven word phrase, is that the best you can do?
And right, we're conservatives. There's a low possibility of arrogance, I think. I don't think I've met too many people at the Leadership Institute that were too brash and arrogant, asking for raises.
But usually that comes from not doing your research, a sense of that,
Right, the danger
going
is
in and asking for a salary too high or
sure,
like
and
that.
that's exactly right. Not doing the research or not paying attention to the research that you've done. And try not to give ultimatums, I guess, is another thing, because then you box people into corners, and that's when distrust and hard feelings start to come into play and make it difficult.
Great.
So,
Steve, thank you for joining us.
Okay.
Great discussion today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. It was another great one. I hope you all learned a lot about how to negotiate your salary, and you're all going to go home tonight and figure out how you're going to get a new salary. So thank you. As always, this webinar was recorded and will be online for your viewing later, and you can send it to your friends. You can watch it later as you prepare to ask for your negotiating a salary, and that will be at leadershipinstitute.org/activism on demand. With that, our next webinar will be in 2 weeks on November 18th, and that will be with Peggy Grand at 3 p.m. Thank you all for joining us, and that's all we have today.